how much of our diet do we want to be fat? And is there such a thing as good fats or bad fats?
Right. See, the first issue people should understand is that when you look at a study on fat, especially on Western and American populations, they're not studying whole food sources of fat like nuts, seeds, and avocados, because the fats consumed in the modern world, and especially in the United States, are oils and animal fats. So by registering the fat content of a diet, you're registering the amount of oil and animal fats a person is eating. So when you're looking at studies on Americans looking at fat intake, then we're saying, okay, does eating oils and animal fats, that combination of oils and animal fats, have a detriment? And then you show, yes, those are detrimental, because a higher fat diet makes for increased risk of disease, like heart disease and cancer and breast cancer.
Right.
So a person could look at that study and say, look at that. The lower the fat, the better. So people, with regard to breast cancer. So that means that people should not eat nuts and seeds or avocados. That's like saying, all right, sugar is bad and white flour is a sugar equivalent, and adding white flour or sugar increases risk of breast cancer, so people should not eat mangoes or berries because they contain sugar.
Right.
No, sugar and white flour doesn't behave like berries and mangoes do.
Right.
And neither does oils and animal fats act in the body like nuts and seeds do. They're completely different animals. And that's why everybody quotes the studies. Like when the guy wrote the book, The Wheat Belly Diet, or the Anti-Wheat Book, he used studies. If you read his studies, which I did, where's the support for showing how poisonous gluten is and wheat is? And I went through every study, and almost every study that showed negative effects of wheat were using white flour and showing negative effects of white flour. That shows the negative effects of sugar. That doesn't prove gluten is bad for you. Sure, we know gluten's bad for some people, but the same thing, almost everybody's distorting the research, because if you're going to claim that fat is bad, or if you're going to claim that it's better to reduce nuts and seeds, then let's look at study on nuts and seeds alone. And if I could just say one more point, I know you want to ask a question, but one more point is that when you eat oil or animal fats, those calories come into the bloodstream almost instantaneously. They're like eating sugar, because sugar, the glucose comes in very fast.
So it's a fast food.
A fast food. Now, oils come in very fast. We're saying about, let's say, 40 to 50 calories a minute. Now, when you eat nuts and seeds, they come in so slowly, about 1.5 calories, 1 to 1.5 calories a minute. That's 50 times the speed of calories entering the bloodstream. So when people saying, oh, eating fat makes your diabetes poorly controlled. Yeah, because when you put 50 calories in your bloodstream, then the body can't burn it for energy. It has to store it for fat. It's the fat stored on the body that causes the problem. And it's turning on the fat storage biological mechanisms that then interferes with the metabolism of glucose and makes your diabetes more poorly controlled. But when you take in fat from a nut or seed, because it comes in at 1 calorie a minute, not 50 calories a minute, the body can preferentially burn it for energy. And when you're burning calories for energy, it's not stored in the body, and it's not interfering with metabolism or interfering with insulin resistance. So there's no diabetic negative with nuts and seeds coming in compared to oil coming in. So people make the mistake. They look at the studies on oil and they extrapolate it to think it's going to be the same when you eat nuts and seeds, and it's not.
So it sounds like what you're saying is the fat from animal products and oil are a huge contributor to heart disease and diabetes.
And cancer.
And cancer. All three. Bam, bam, bam.
Bam, bam, bam.
Not to mention that heart disease they're saying is the number one killer of all ways to die in the U.S. Isn't that crazy? Oh, it might be worldwide. Heart disease is the number one killer worldwide.
That's correct.
And you've also told me this before, and you also think cancer would be more prevalent if heart disease didn't kill everyone, because it would have them live a little longer, and then poor nutrition just catches up with you in the end.
That's right. Most people who have prostate cancer, for example, the number one cause of death for men with prostate cancer is heart attacks.
So crazy.
But the people that are having their heart attacks also have cancer cells in their body. So if we could give them this magic pill was going to wipe out heart attacks, they'd still get cancer a few years later, or they wouldn't live that much longer, because you can't negate the negative impact of eating the American diet, which I say has been designed by Al-Qaeda. You know what I mean?
Yeah, out to get us.
You can't design a more dangerous diet than what Americans eat. That's why other diets look good. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Which I wanted to comment. since we do this podcast together, I've been looking at the original nutritional research sources on, the scientific journals and all that.
Yeah.
And it's in my head whenever there's this one article that I was researching for this podcast on the keto diet. And it was saying all these short-term benefits of keto. But what you don't realize is you keep asking yourself, what are they comparing to? So keto can look really good next to a diet that's full. They did keto diet with obese people with a BMI over 35.
Right.
So it could look really good for people that eat junk food or the standard American diet filled with fried garbage and processed foods. And once they're incorporating whole foods, and even if it's not the ideal, it'll still look better. So it's always like what you're comparing it to in the scientific literature too, that I start to ask myself.
That's definitely true. It's that what could have you done instead of that could have gotten those results or gotten beneficial results without the dangers or risks.
Right.
So it's always comparing a risk-benefit ratio. Everything has some benefits, but it's also associated with risk. So with a plant-based diet, we get the same weight loss, cholesterol-lowering benefits, anti-diabetic benefits, without the raising the risk of heart attack and certain cancers. Because obviously we know that, and I showed multiple studies in a prior podcast. I held up 8 different studies to show that as the carbohydrate reduction went down, and keto means you're restricting carbohydrates below 30% to get in ketosis, and most of those diets are 10%, 20%, 15 or 20% carbohydrate, and those those in the scientific literature are the most dangerous for shortening lifespan associated with early life death. So long term, it's not good to stay in ketosis. It's not great to acidify the body long term. It's not good to raise your uric acid and your purines and your formation of stones, and it ages the joints. It causes more destruction of the cartilage. It causes more kidney stone formation. But the main thing is it's aging the blood vessels, and it's increasing risk of cancer from the chronic acidosis. So people dying younger from those diets long term, even if they have short term benefits.